2018 was the hardest year of my life. I had a rupture between one of my best friends. Onnit, at that point, had reached a bit of a plateau. Our CFO just walks into a meeting and goes, "You guys are going to be bankrupt in a month. I'm out. I'm leaving." No notice. He just left. He just walked out. I had to confront, oh wow, this might be how this beautiful company that I love so much, this might all go away. I got in a car wreck too. Inexplicably, the next thing I remember were the jaws of life cutting into my totaled car that had went through a guardrail, and I was just an absolute bloody mess. The hardest part was there was the most difficult moment in my polyamory journey. I felt simultaneously like I was going to cry, vomit, and scream and fight, and like it was this one of the strongest feelings I've ever felt.
Wow.
I just had to hang up the phone.
Like blood rush to your face.
Yeah, I was like, I have to call you back. And I just sit down on the floor, it was the wood floor of this room, and I just started sobbing. There was no solution that I had, so I just started praying. It doesn't go away by masking it, and it doesn't go away by running from it. It goes away by running towards it. This force that I call anti-you, it took over my father's psyche, and he never recovered. I could very clearly see this as like a dark spirit that had taken over his mind and his soul. This voice was too strong, and it was offering too many seductions. So, anti-you, you killed my father. Prepare to die. This is a fight for everybody's individual life and soul, and it's also a fight for the future of humanity.
Welcome to the episode of Edge of My Seat. Today, I'm so excited to have my dear friend, Aubrey Marcus, on the show. He is the founder of Onnit, which is the massive, epic human optimization company that has sold for $350 million. He has his own incredible, massive podcast called The Aubrey Marcus Show. And he has a couple of books, one that's out and one that is coming out on March 25th of 2025 called You versus Anti-You. I'm so excited to read this book. Today's episode is so exciting and so filled with wisdom from him on everything from love, from just the wildest, darkest moments of his life, and all the things that he did to clean them up. So I hope you enjoy the show. This podcast is really special and near and dear to my heart because I always like hearing the stories of people who have been through a lot in their lives, who've had high highs and have had low lows, or just the breadth of life is just available to you, and you're just one of those magical, incredible people who can hold all the different experiences. And this podcast is really about sort of dropping us in to the darkest, shittiest, hardest moment of your life, and what were the things internally and externally that you did to clean it up. Mm-hmm. So if you can just put us in the scene of where you were, what was happening, what year was it, and then just share the story, and then I want to hear what you did to clean it up.
Yeah. 2018 was the hardest year of my life. I had a rupture between one of my best friends that was just so deeply painful. You know, it was a trivial matter that got expanded into something that really like weakened the trust between us, and you know, ultimately was never able to be recovered. And that was really devastating for me to have, and I've had that pattern that's come up with, especially, you know, male friends.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that that's, you know, been something that's tracked through my life, and it's still a karmic pattern that exists, and is deeply painful because, you know, what I really want in the image I have is like, I'm trying to stand on the front lines of whatever battle there is, you know, standing for what we believe in. And I want to look around and see my brothers there with me. You know, it's like William Wallace at Falkirk, where he looks around to see Robert the Bruce, and Robert the Bruce is taking his horses the other way, and he's going, "Oh my God, how did you do this?" So it's this kind of pattern that's, existed. So I was dealing with that.
Is it coming from, you think, jealousy, envy? Is it coming from power dynamics, struggle, like the masculine sort of that kind of energy?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think if I had to give an overarching generality, there's a way in which I stand for someone to show up as their best. And I have a very kind of piercing and observant and loving gaze, but I can see somebody and I can see what they're capable of and I can see what their soul is desiring. And so the reflection that I offer is a reflection of their ultimate potential.
And that can be confronting.
At certain points, some people are not willing to look at the reflection that I'm offering. And, or I'm just a dick and I don't know it. I don't know. But, I mean, I'm open to all different possibilities. But I would say that if I trusted my intuition, it was that. It was that there's something confronting about my friendship.
How long were you friends with this person?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
And do you feel like it was a buildup of tension, or you think it's just sort of this one thing that just?
I think there was
hand.
threads of discomfort
Yeah.
that developed, but there was no trigger point to actually to give any kind of plausible cause to create separation. And then the right circumstance came about that could give cause for that separation.
I'm curious, so contextually, where was Onnit at this time? Were you guys on a crazy hockey stick rise, or what was the background of this moment?
At that point had kind of reached a bit of a plateau. So we had this meteoric rise from 2011 to 2017. And then we kind of hit this place where for the first time we weren't growing anymore. So we hit this kind of sticking point.
Or you're like growing like 5% or even like flat.
Yeah, no, it was flat. So we had a year flat. And so we're in this kind of flat space trying to figure out how to figure things out. And so there's 4 things that happened that year. The first was this, very dear brother and I having this rupture. And then the second was on it, there was a variety of we were actually looking to get our first official financing from a third party. And we brought it right to the 1 yard line, and then some things didn't align, but we'd already distributed our cash at that point. So we were in what we called the cash apocalypse because we had accounts payable, but no cash because we were expecting to get 20 million into the business, but that fell through. So basically we had no operating capital, and our CFO just walks into a meeting and goes, "You guys are going to be bankrupt in a month. I'm out. I'm leaving." No notice. He just left. He just walked out. And so
but you had receivables, but they weren't coming through.
Yeah, but they weren't coming in fast enough to pay for the payables.
It's like that. It's just the shoe dog game.
Yeah,
it's
exactly. So ultimately, we had to talk to all of our different vendors and extend our terms. If we were on net 60 or net 30, net 90, we're like, all right, can we go net 120? Can you give us 180 on this? We got you. And fortunately, we built up enough trust that all of our vendors, kept the products flowing and they made the right bet. Because after that, we made it through cash apocalypse. Jason Havey, who was the president at that time, became the CEO before we sold. And he really just put in those, 18 hours a day, figuring it out, calling every vendor, sorting it all out. And we were able to make it through and ultimately sell the company in 2021. So happy ending to the story. But that was incredibly intense because I had to confront, oh, wow, this might be how this beautiful company that I love so much and this vehicle for me to actually accumulate the resources that I really want to change the world, this might all go away.
Isn't that amazing? You spend years and years just hockey stick growth, and there's just one moment that could just, it's like years to build and one match to just burn it all away.
Yeah.
It's just, I've experienced that both at Things, at Tushy. It's that squeeze moment where you're going from like a smaller and you have a big moment, but you still have to build up to that, build your, your factory and build your lines. And there's people don't understand what's happening in the background. They're just seeing like the restaurant in the front ground, like the front of the house, just chill and nice music, and back of the house, like shit's flying.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Yeah, so beautiful that you were able to get through that with your team.
Indeed.
But it's stressful.
It is super stressful. So those 2 things, the friend, the business, I got in a car wreck too, inexplicably, just blinked out of consciousness in the middle of the day, heading to a podcast with actually the musician Nako Bear. He was here at the studio, and I was heading to go, sober, didn't even party the night before, had a nice morning, did my morning routine, was sipping a sparkling water. Last thing I remember was leaving my gate, and then the next thing I remember were the jaws of life cutting into my totaled car that had went through a guardrail, and I was just an absolute bloody mess.
We'll show a picture, but
yeah, it's gnarly.
Whoa.
I mean, it was really gnarly. Pulled my nose, mostly off my face, and they had to stitch it back down. And I still have a ton of nerve damage in this left side of my face. Thank you.
It
has character.
Cool. Yeah, it's great.
And I got a tooth that's dead and turning black. I keep threatening Vailana that I'm going to make it a gold tooth. But she prefers the black tooth to this point.
Great.
But yeah, so that was the car wreck, but that actually, all three of those things were pretty difficult. And that's an understatement. That's a euphemism.
Almost dying.
Yeah,
minor.
The hardest part was there was the most difficult moment in my polyamory journey. So I'd been polyamorous with my partner and fiance at the time, Whitney, since 2014. So we're 4 years into our polyamory journey at that point. And
I want to actually, we'll get to this, but I want to hear a bit more about just how the journey started.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Do you want to go there now?
Yeah, let's go there now. Let's go.
Okay.
It's how did you even decide that that's a journey you want to enter and try?
Well, I started to understand from a spiritual, philosophical level the nature of love. And I identified that the love was like the sun, and it ultimately shines on all beings. And the idea that you would possess somebody else's love, or they would possess your love, and you would have to channel it instead of the sun, which is like the ultimate lantern that shines in all directions, you'd have to shine it like a laser. And no matter where that person went, you'd have to follow them with the laser of your love.
Right.
It didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Or like holding with your fist closed versus open.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So there was this philosophical understanding of it, and I read a book from Dr. Chris Ryan called Sex at Dawn, and it talked about other different mating patterns that people had since prehistory. And I understood that this monogamous construct was just a construct, and it has its beauty, and it has its, there's a lot of virtue in this monogamous construct, but it's still just a construct.
Right.
I was like, all right, I want to explore a different type of construct. And I recognized that, to do that, everything would have to be radically equal. There was nothing that I could do that my partner couldn't do. And I thought I was well equipped for that. I thought, look, love is like the sun. What do you mean? No one needs to possess it, and I can be happy for you if you're experiencing love somewhere else. So I had a partner first, and it was very, very difficult for Whitney. And I look back now and I was like, man, you were not nearly as sympathetic as you should have been, because you had no idea how difficult it would be.
To receive that.
Yeah, so then she finally got a partner, and it was just devastating. So this is 2015, and I remember the first time that she had a partner. It was actually kind of a funny story.
Do you remember if she was doing it just to show you what it feels like, or because she actually found someone that was a vibe?
No, she found someone she was into.
Great.
She found someone she was into. And I remember I was going on to a 3-week dieta, which is a spiritual practice where you commune with the spirit of a plant. I chose Rose, and you do psychedelic journeys and then go into isolation.
Cool.
So I was going into 3 weeks of isolation.
Wow. Where?
And it started in Colorado, then it went to British Columbia. So I didn't go to the jungle for this.
But solo.
Yeah, solo.
Cool.
And guided by a shaman for the opening and the closing, but the bulk of the journey was solo.
Wow.
But I remember, so I'm leaving on this journey, and I have a backup phone so nobody can reach me. I'm kind of isolated. And Whitney, before I left, was hanging out with her paramour, with her new lover.
Right.
They hadn't had sex yet.
Paramour is the term.
Paramour is the term,
okay.
yeah. So they hadn't had sex yet. They were just very flirty and kind of, vibing. And he was supposed to leave at the same time that I was supposed to leave. We were both just coincidentally going different places, but going to be at the airport at the same time. Then I heard them over the loudspeaker in the airport go, and I'll make up a name, like Chuck Johnson, your flight's about to leave. And I was like, oh my God, that motherfucker stayed. he stayed because he's gonna fuck my girlfriend. And I just knew it. Like I knew
as you're going into,
as I'm going into my home
no.
flight, and I'm like, no way. And so I'm just thinking about that, and I'm like, maybe not. Maybe he was just late for his flight, whatever. So then
You had talked to him at some
yeah, we knew each other.
Okay. Was
So
that hard?
that-
Was that weird for you?
That's actually easier.
It's actually better, right?
It's way better.
There's more trust almost.
It's way
Yeah.
better. Yeah, it's way better. So, so I was like, all right. So I convinced myself that maybe he just missed his flight. He's a
Right.
busy guy, but sure enough, we ended up. I broke the silence and isolation valve because I just couldn't take it anymore. 2 weeks later, and I called her and I was like, hey, I heard
What's
this thing
going
come
on?
over the loudspeaker. Did he stay? And did you guys have sex? And she's like, yes. And I was like, I felt simultaneously like I was going to cry, vomit, and scream and fight. And like, it was one of the strongest feelings I've ever felt. I just
Wow.
had to hang up the phone.
Like
and
blood
go
rush to your face.
Yeah, I was like, I have to call you back. And I was just like in the most overwhelming sensation. And so there
Beautiful
was
that you even knew to like have enough wherewithal to hang up and just gather yourself.
thankfully,
Because otherwise the smoke coming out of
yeah, and it's not that she didn't get the smoke either. I was unequipped to
Totally.
be able to handle it. But we worked our way through it, and I recognized then that the way that my mind worked, I had to actually accept the worst case scenario. So I would be like, all right, this is what happened. And I created this like wild, like unbearable fantasy of what she'd done with him, and like she was tied up in a horse stable and fed dog food and just fucked all day. And like I was like, all right, if you can accept that, then because every time I'd think about a new
Brilliant.
thing, I was like doggy style. Oh, I was ready to vomit. I was like
my God.
oral sex. Oh,
yeah.
I was gonna die. But eventually, made it through.
Is your first experience of this kind of dynamic in your life?
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first one. That was extremely hard, but there was more difficult moments and challenging moments, and I really started to understand how difficult it was, for Whitney. And so there was a beautiful aspect of that, because it was like, all right, I see you now, and I'm so sorry that I was so callous to how deep this goes and how challenging this is. So, we had a pretty beautiful stretch in our relationship from then forward, where a lot of things, I still, look back at that relationship with absolute fondness, and I have so much love for Whitney.
Yeah.
She's an absolute, just a firecracker, and I'm just rooting for her in every way. She's a country music singer now, and I'm just like, I still listen to her music, and I'm like, you fucking get it.
Yes.
I'm so happy for her. But ultimately, this led to 2018, and so I had created in my mind all of the worst case fantasy scenarios of what would be the most difficult for me. And then in 2018, she started to live those scenarios. So she got together with a Dom, so like a BDSM Dom, and I didn't know this guy at all.
Oh.
And there
Tell
was
me the
this,
difference between the distinction for you that knowing someone versus not knowing someone. Why is it better for you knowing someone?
if you know someone, then, and especially the more you love that person, it's your brother.
Right.
Right. It's your brother. So imagine if you have a dope Cybertruck, right? So imagine if you have some random person that you don't know who's taking the keys to your car and driving it around. You don't really trust them with your car.
Right.
But if it's your sister,
For sure.
like, yeah, take my car.
Yeah, yeah,
Have
yeah.
fun.
Of course.
Like there's a different thing. You trust them to leave the car better than when they found it. Like they'll probably
100%.
fill it up with gas.
Totally.
They might even clean out some of your shit that you left in the car,
Totally.
So they'll leave it better than they found it. Where if you don't know that person, you
They'll
don't
just be like, whatever.
trust
It's
that.
like a hotel room.
And who cares if they're enjoying themselves,
Right.
So like ultimately to get into that state of compersion where you're sharing the pleasure, you want to share the pleasure that your partner's having, but also share in the pleasure that this person who you love, also your brother,
For sure.
is having. So
I feel the
it
same
makes it
way too.
easier.
I could only enter a space like that if it was someone I knew. I would feel
Yeah.
too uncomfortable with some
Right.
random on either side. Whether
Right.
yeah.
And so,
But I'm so Indian too. Like, I just want to be peed on, and I want you to pee on me, and I'm monogamous, and I just want to be claimed. There's also that piece that does like,
but
that
I
it's
think
like constantly opening.
I think you can have both, because that reclamation energy you're talking about, which is like your mine, it's actually exacerbated. So like when someone is free and they're with somebody else, the intensity of the passion of that reclamation is like, you are mine. I'm canceling all meetings, all calls. We're going in, and I'm like going to be devoted to your ecstasy for the next like 2 days.
100%.
So there's a way in which it can really incite a lot of beautiful passion.
I get that. I've experienced that too, for sure.
So in this scenario where she was with this dom, I would literally see like
Marks.
the roadmap, the territory of everything that they'd done as she would come back. And it was the most difficult thing that I'd ever experienced, because we hadn't stepped into play as deeply in those waters.
Right. So she's doing stuff with him
we'd never done.
Right. Ooh, that's tough.
We'd never done. And it was like this idea of a level of surrender to somebody else that was beyond the level of surrender that we'd had, and they
still
were
trying to feel a compersion.
Yeah, and they were doing things, so that relationship started moving, and it was so impossibly difficult. Again, I didn't know this guy, so this all culminates into a moment where I'm in New York by myself in a hotel room. I was also launching my book at that point, so it was during my book release. So
Which
much
one?
happened this year. Own the Day, Own Your Life.
Yeah, beautiful.
So I'm in the hotel room, and she's leaving to go to some wedding that this guy had, so they're going to spend a couple days together in this wedding. And I just, knowing that she was there, it just all hit me, and I'm alone in my hotel room, and I just sit down on the floor, it's a wood floor of this room, and I just started sobbing, and I just couldn't, I was like simultaneously, again, it's this combination of nausea, grief, and anger. And I was like, literally breaking down, and there was no solution that I had. So I just started praying, and I said, God, please help me. Like, I need something. I'm so wounded right now. Like, please. And I heard a voice come back to me, and the voice said, "The sun does not judge itself by the shadows that it casts," which is kind of cryptic, but I understood it as basically there was a way in which I was reflecting upon myself based upon what my love was creating in Whitney, and what that manifestation looked like. And, that divine voice was reminding me, like, no, you're the sun, and you just shine. And whether that flower blooms or whether that flower doesn't bloom or whether it blooms for somebody else, you're still the sun. Doesn't change your nature. And that gave me just enough space to be able to make it through that moment. But it was, of all of the difficult things that happened that year, that was the point of the very lowest point that I'd ever gotten to. I'd never broken down in that much pain ever before in my life.
It's so interesting, the concept of capacity, right? Like, I've been thinking so much about capacity. Like, the sun has so much capacity. The ocean has so much capacity. When you throw like a little pebble inside a little glass, there's so much shaking up inside the little glass because there's not much space. When you throw a pebble in an ocean, barely anything, because there's so much capacity in the ocean. And so it's the same thing with sun. It's like, oh, you're focusing on the shadow part, or you're just shining.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the capacity that you're focusing on? And I think about that from a realm of like, for you or for me, if you're going through stuff personally, in business, in love, in romance, and there's just so much happening, you're like, wow, I am at capacity.
Yep.
Like, but I'm like, okay, I'm just in this glass. Like, how do I expand myself to be the ocean? And so that when stuff gets thrown, it's just it flows. So yeah, I'm curious to understand, like, what did you do from that lowest point to increase your capacity? So you prayed, you got this answer, and then what?
I started writing poetry.
Wow.
And that's the way for me to start to alchemize a lot of these challenges, is to write and share. I've been very vulnerable with my audience throughout this time, and I think my audience got kind of a little worn out of all my vulnerable, painful shares. They're like, why are you even doing this, bro? I'm like, well, there's a lot of good stuff too. I just don't write about that because like I don't need to alchemize it.
Totally.
So, but really the writing process.
I play ball too,
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes shit's good, but that's a boring email.
Totally.
Like, hey, shit's good, balled today.
Totally. I love vulnerable masculine. It's beautiful.
So that was really a big part of the process, was just to share it, learn the lessons, and I can look back and be grateful for all of it, because no challenge that I'll face, I mean, and I don't want to say that there could be a new challenge of a new difficulty and a new level, but I feel like my resilience was tested in a maximum way that year, and so I feel like it actually expanded my capacity, because I feel like if I could make it through all of those challenges on the 4 different vectors, on love and jealousy and partnership and brotherhood and business and physical disfigurement, if I could make it through all of that in the same year, then all right, I got a bit of resilience here, and so it gives me a greater sense of peace.
What were some of like? Did you incorporate like some daily practices that I love the idea of prayer. I'm just starting to understand prayer, to set up an altar. Like I'm just, even if I'm Indian and Hindu and Buddhist, like I have a little altar with Kuan Yin and some flowers and some crystals, but to really incorporate prayer, and like, what are some of the, like, again, when you're having these low points, and so many people have low points, and most people just run away from them or just keep busying themselves, or let me just do, or go to the next thing and not actually process, integrate. What are some of the practices that you can offer to people who have gone through so much and are just beyond capacity?
Yeah. Well, you gotta find a way to feel it. Like it doesn't go away by masking it, and it doesn't go away by running from it. It goes away by running towards it. You gotta feel it to the fullest, whether that's grief. Like if you're in grief, you gotta grieve. You gotta wail. You gotta go down to a river with a close friend, and you got to scream and cry and sing the songs that you used to sing with that person, and write the notes and, burn them or send them to the bottom of the river, and really be with your grief. You got to feel it all the way through. And that's, Martin Prechtel, who wrote an amazing book, The Smell of Rain on Dust, he says that grief is the ultimate form of praise. It reminds you of what you love. If you don't grieve, it denies the nature of how much you love. So it allows you to step back into love when you really grieve. So to fully grieve is one. The other is to go into some of the transformational practices like ecstatic dance. Your sister has Daybreaker, and it's such a powerful practice. We offer that with Fit for Service every time we gather together as an ecstatic dance. Really allow you to go into the story and express it through your body. And so that's one of the tools that I use. Breathwork is another extraordinarily powerful tool that seems to melt away all of the different caverns and, kind of jail cells that emotions have been incarcerated in. And it just melts all that away, and you get to express.
What do you do about jealousy and envy? Because it's just such an interesting sensation that people have. When you said like you're overcome, but you now have built so many tools in your tool belt, but there's so many unintegrated kind of jealousy and envy that comes up, and comparison. How could one really shift that?
Well, so there's many masters of different traditions that say that envy is the one emotion that can't be alchemized directly. So envy and jealousy are different. So jealousy is this feeling of, I want what you have. I want what you have. But there's still this belief that you could have it, that you could get it. So there's an energy to it. So it can drive you to become better. It's like, I want what you have. I'm going to work twice as hard. I want what you have. I'm fucking hitting the gym. I'm getting my shit togetger. It's that Toby Keith song, How Do You Like Me Now? There's like an energy to jealousy.
Right.
Like, now that I'm on my way.
How do you like me?
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So there's an energy that you can use with jealousy. And, you don't want to rely on that as the primary fuel source, but you can actually drive yourself to your own greatness from that feeling of like, I want this. Envy is the belief that, I can't ever get that. So I need to tear you down because I can't bear. So Envy is the precursor to malice, sadism, the enjoyment. If you're envious of someone, you enjoy when they fall.
Right.
It actually gives you pleasure when they suffer.
Oof.
And so it's such a deeply dark emotion. So if you do find yourself in envy, which is like a super contracted, compounded, metastasized jealousy, right? Because if you're in jealous, you're like, all right, I'm going to go get mine. You know, good for you, but I'm going to fucking go get mine, you know? Or even fuck you, I'm going to go do better. You know, either way, it's still there's energy, there's forward motion.
Yeah.
If you find yourself in energy, you got to move it back to jealousy. Like
envy.
If you find yourself in envy, you got to move it back to jealousy. You got to say, all right, instead of wanting you to suffer, I got to get back to jealousy where I want to be better. I want to make myself better. I want to actually compete with you. It's a competitor is never envious. A competitor is always just jealous.
Right.
You know, because they're like, I'm going to compete.
Yeah.
And so if you can find that competitiveness inside of you, say like, I'm going to compete.
Totally.
Then you can start to move forward.
My girlfriend, one of my girlfriends, she's like, I wake up every morning and I just say, I want to beat Miki at entrepreneurship. And I'm like, great. Bring
totally.
it. Like, yes.
Totally.
She tells me that. And I actually love it because I'm like, let's go. I'll help you beat me. Like, let's do this. I love that. But we were talking about the idea of the murder of Eros by Wilhelm Reich and the idea that, like, the philosopher, the idea that, like, the murder of Eros is like the murder of someone's life force energy. The idea that you want to murder someone else's life force energy to make yourself feel less small. And so it's that idea of like feeling less small. That's a really interesting thing versus, like, I always say, like, replace envy with inspiration. Like, oh, I'm so inspired by that person.
Exactly.
Like, look at this. Yeah, it's the same thing. Jealousy and inspiration is like, there's like a little line between, but at least I always find myself to be like, oh, wow, like this is so cool. And it's really tough when dealing with like the envy. Like, how do you deal with that, and how do you sort of compost that in you? Because you're clearly a feeling being. I'm a feeling being. You know, what is the way to overcome that?
Well, it's interesting because envy contains within it malice. Someone actually wants you to suffer.
Yeah.
And if they had the power to make you suffer, like let's say they were a powerful brujo, which is a sorcerer, and they could cast a sorcery spell and actually make you suffer, if envy's strong enough, they would hurt you. And so there's an aspect of you that's like, oh, we got to take them out, right? Like there's this natural instinct.
Right.
And in the lineage of Solomon, the Hebrew, mystical lineage that I'm studying, there's this continued question about one of the tribes of Israel called Amalek. And Amalek were just murderous, envious, agents of chaos and malice. And the masters have argued for a long time, what do you do about Amalek? And some say, in this kind of Christic mindset, you love them and you invite them back into their highest potential. And then other masters are like, take them out. Just fucking take them out. So there's that war that goes on inside our own minds, which is difficult.
It totally, and it's interesting is that I went through my own takedown, like when someone tried to envy to just tear me down, saying crazy things, and I remember I was just like, wow, like we can take them out, and I've thought about the different samurai methods of that, right? But then I was like, actually, the more ninja, the more samurai thing, the actual like the 3 steps forward is actually like honoring them as your, what I call them, angel obstacle creators. So I was like, wow, like this person became an obstacle angel in my life to teach me something about myself, how I'm receiving, the envy and how I've reacted to it versus becoming the ocean. And just like, when you're in a cup and you're like getting agitated by someone's stones, I'm like, wow, like the actual to me, like the gift of the gift is not just like I'm actually like I've made it beyond your shit, but actually to feel the gratitude of the person's envy. And so there's this like almost like I got to a place of like wanting to touch the feet of those who want to tear me down as a gift of teaching me how to better become be in the dojo of like, it's almost like jujitsu where you're using their they're like, ugh, to like actually, learn better. So there's so many ways to kind of move through the pain or move through the what the fuck, like why I can't believe this is happening to me, but it's like, wow, like what a gift in the end. I mean, I don't know if you
I resonate with that completely. I
Yeah.
mean, the book that I'm currently writing is You versus Anti-You, and Anti-You is that own inner antagonist that's inside of us, a
Yes.
force of resistance. Stephen Pressfield calls it resistance. Phil Stutz calls it part X. The Bible might call it Satan.
Yes.
Don Miguel Ruiz and Castaneda call it the parasite or the predator. There's names for it across all lineages where we understand that there's this actually deeply antagonistic force of negation inside of us.
Totally.
But the move is to actually, like a dojo bow to your opponent and say, like, I appreciate you that you're trying to fuck me up, because that's going to drive my evolution. It's going to make me better, tighter, my game stronger.
Yes.
It's Larry Bird and Magic. It's Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield. It's like, you are the opposition that is going to drive me to become better.
I love that.
And, it's this interesting balance of, I honor you and I appreciate you, and you are my opponent and I'm gonna fuck you up. It's like it's a combination of both. But I think you hit it right on the head. I think that's actually the best way to approach it.
And also, like, I'm reading this book, The Untethered Soul. It's my second time. I don't know if you've read it, by Michael Singer. He amazing. He also wrote the book The Surrender Experiment. Anyways, he's a special being, and he talks about the inner roommate. How we have this like inner roommate that just keeps talking shit all day long. And you're just like, if you had a roommate that you lived with and you just wouldn't stop talking shit 24, you just be like, after one day, like, get out of I need to move out or get out. Like, this is crazy that we tolerate this inner critic to just talk and talk and talk. And so, like, what would be some strategies from your perspective, just maybe from your book upcoming, to think about ways to just quiet that voice inside that negates everything?
There's 13 chapters, 13 moves that you make.
Cool.
And chapter 7 is the 7th move, and it's retrain the inner coach, right? So this roommate that we have inside, oftentimes we just call it the critic, because that's all it does.
Right.
All it does is talk shit. But it's actually there to guide what I call our player, our ego, the player. It's like the player. So the ego is our identity structure. It's like, you think of a player, they have their jersey, and the jersey has a name and has their number, which is like our social security number that the officials can call and, tax us with. And then it has our team, which is like our tribal identity, and it has our statistics. It has everything attached to it. So the coach is there to guide the player ultimately to win the game. So this is the super ego construct from Freud, but I call it the coach and the player.
Beautiful.
So the coach is, the function of it is there to guide the player. But like many coaches that we had, I don't know if you had any terrible coaches. I did. And so terrible coaches, what do? They just criticize you.
Right.
They motivate, they tear you down, they motivate through fear. And that's what we've learned oftentimes from other coaches, or just we've picked it up from culture. So the coach is just misguided. It's just a shitty coach. But if you actually retrain the coach and say, like, I know what you're doing. You're actually here to help me. And that function is here to help me. Now, doesn't mean that the coach can't get taken over and subsumed by that force of negation, the devil within,
right,
and actually literally be trying to tear you down. But most of the time, that voice, the faculty of that voice, is there to guide the player to win the game. So you say, all right, coach, like, I see what you're doing. We got a better strategy. We're going to start giving encouraging, positive words. We're going to adopt the voice of the best coach we could imagine, like Pete Carroll type of coach, like, get in there, you got this, like, keep going. I know it's hard. Or the voice of the loving mother, like, I know, sweetheart, I know it's difficult, but I believe in you. You're so strong and I got your back. And so you retrain that voice to actually support you in the way that you need to be supported. And that's a choice. When that voice comes, you go, no. This is not the way that you're going to talk to me.
Yeah.
And it's just the authority of what I call the captain of the self, the captain of your soul, the master of your destiny. The captain comes in and says, no, coach.
Don't talk to me like that.
You're not talking to me like that. It's not helpful. This is the way you're going to talk to me. And then you pattern that other voice that comes in. So retrain the inner coach is move 7 in my upcoming book.
When's the book coming out?
March 25th,
Wow.
which is going to be the 2-year anniversary where I found my father who had passed away. Yeah.
Oof. Wow. And is there some father energy in the book?
Yeah, well, ultimately, this force that I call anti-you, it took over around 2010, and it took over my father's psyche, and he never recovered, and so
Internally within himself?
he ended up having these kind of delusions, and there was this energy that kind of came in that was telling him things that weren't true, and it took over his mind. And there's obviously the pathology that I could look at, that's the psychiatrist would analyze this as that, but I could very, very clearly see this as like a dark spirit that had taken over his mind and his soul. And
did you try to?
Yeah, we tried everything. He was, committed to the mental hospital a few times, but this voice was too strong, and it was offering too many seductions. And I could, go very deep in explaining the story, and I do in my book. But ultimately, you ever see the movie Princess Bride?
Yeah.
So, this book is very much like, I'm like Inigo Montoya, And so, anti-you, you killed my father. Prepare to die. Yeah, so it's a very important book, not just for my own battles, but the consequences are grave, and I see the way that this voice got in. I see the traps that it set, and the seductions and the vulnerabilities
and offering how to release them.
Yeah, and ultimately, this is a book that's trying to illuminate this aspect of the self, so that other people like my father and who are really in the throes of the battle, and other people like myself, and anybody can identify this. Anybody who plays golf knows that little voice will come in right in your backswing and be like, hit it really hard.
Right.
Like it'll fuck you up in the smallest way, and it'll fuck you up in the biggest way, all the way to the point where, my father died isolated and alone, March 25th, 2023.
And you found him.
I found him, yeah.
Oof.
And so, yeah, so it's a big and important book, and I'm giving it everything I got, and pouring myself into it.
Just dedicated to him.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like he also was such an inspiration in your life on
He
entrepreneurship.
He was, yeah. And that was also the hard part, because, anti-you took, one of my best friends. And so, this is a story of, in some ways it's the classic revenge story, and in other ways it's just like the most loving honoring of a final gift that my father gave me, which was to help me see the nature of this force, and to help offer this as a gift to the world as part of his legacy.
In what way was it a revenge story?
Well, this force took my father's life. So me writing this book, exposing its tactics, allowing people to set their target sights on it, and to identify it, and to defeat it, because you will never be able to defeat this force universally. It's always going to exist. It's a part of the fabric of the cosmos. It's the eternal opponent. Yeah. But every time every individual wins a battle, it's a battle that's personal but also universal. Every individual victory over anti-you is a collective victory over this force in general. And we look out at the world and we see this force just running rampant. All of the greed and isolation and war and depression and predation. I mean, all of this comes from this source.
Yeah.
And so this is a fight for everybody's individual life and soul, and it's also a fight for the future of humanity.
Thank you for sharing. I can't wait to read it, and for everyone to read it. When I worked with a coach for many years, and one of the things that she has really drilled into my head, especially during the darkest moments of my life, was, there's the negative inner voice that just says stuff again, and then she's like, You just have to catch it every time it comes. So the game is the awareness of it.
Yep.
Like it's like moment by moment awareness of like, oh, I just said this thing about my face or like my eyes or my clothes or my whatever. Like, you're just catching the smallest negative inner voice. And then you have to talk back to it immediately from your higher self.
Yep.
Like an immediate talk back of like, you're beautiful. Like you're, it just immediate, like, but it's the awareness of the negative inner voice until it gets to a point where it overtakes you. Like that's the game, because it sounds like your father got to a place where he just couldn't talk back to it anymore.
No, it offered him something, and it started to compound because it was telling him things, these delusions of grandeur that were so attractive to, because his player wasn't able to evolve into the way where he could still stand in the world the same way he used to. You know, he was one of the pioneers in commodities trading. Then the computer era came, and there was computational power that was beyond the skill of a single individual and larger firms. And so he wasn't able to be who he once was, and he wasn't able to change the game of his player and get enough value from that. So this voice came in and offered him a way in which he could be in the largesse that he desired and that he once was, but it was false. Right. It was a lie, and it was a seduction. And so, that's another element of the story, is to allow your player to die and be reborn, to allow yourself to change your jersey, change your team, change your game, and then allow that natural process of death and rebirth, die before you die, to continue to happen so that you're less susceptible to these seductions.
Wow. And the name of the book again?
You versus Anti-You.
You versus Anti-You, coming out March 25th,
2025.
2025. What are the names of your other books?
So just one other book, Own the Day, Own Your Life. I might publish a poetry compilation between now and then. I've always been a poet, so
yes, please.
It's gonna be it'll be pretty cool, and I'm gonna organize it based on the 7 types of love in the Greek language, ancient Greece.
And I know you have an event called Fit for Service. Can anybody sign up for it, or
anybody can apply, and I'd love to see you guys there. I mean, we have 3 powerful summits every year and some online courses.
What is it?
So it's a combination of education. So we have different courses. I teach along with some of my other coaches, the Spiritually Fit course, which really goes into a lot of this you versus anti-you material. Wow. Like this, beautiful. Coming up. We also have free master classes and webinars. I'm talking about, the warrior poet ethos coming up in a recent master class. And so I'll be teaching the spiritually fit, but there's physically fit, mentally fit, emotionally fit, financially fit, romantically fit. Amazing. So we have these 13-week online components, and then we gather together in summits, and we go through transformational practices like breath work and ecstatic dance and sometimes sweat lodge. And then we have musical celebrations, and then deep, like intense workshops where people get to practice communication and really find the allies and find those people who can stick with them and support them on their journey through life. So it's a really special
I've had so many friends go, and they all totally loved it. It's amazing. I can't wait to go myself.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
We'd
awesome.
love to have you.
Well, Aubrey Marcus, ladies and gentlemen, founder of Onnit, built it to $350 million. He has this the most incredible podcast called The Aubrey Marcus Show. He's written, his first book,
Own the Day, Own Your Life.
Own Your Life. And his new book is coming out March 25th called
You versus Anti-You.
You versus Anti-You. And I'm so thrilled, again, to be in your orbit, to be an ally, and to just be on this journey in Austin, Texas together. So.
Absolutely. You're one of my favorite people on planet Earth. So It's always a pleasure when we get to hang.
I love you too. Yay. Nailed it.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. All right. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. I am so touched. My heart is full. My soul is full. I just feel really, really excited about his book that's coming out, You versus Anti-You. And if you really enjoyed this episode, then go check out hellotushy.com and support us, and we will keep these going. So hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you in the next one.